It was the long, thin cry a hungry wolf makes when it scents its prey. The cry was answered by another, and soon the pine wood echoed with the howls of the hunting pack. Ivan tried to go faster, but the snow sucked at his boots, making him stumble. He looked back, sobbing. His footprints wound away between the trees, and somewhere back there he knew the wolves were running in his tracks, with their noses down to smell him out. A tree! He must find a tree to climb. Wolves can outrun any living thing, but they cannot climb trees. He stumbled on, looking wildly around him, but the trees just here were all pines with smooth, icy trunks. The wolf cries drew nearer. He looked back. Dim shapes moved in the dark beneath the trees. He plunged forward, gasping. They had seen him now. A few seconds more, and they would be upon him. He glanced all about and ploughed through the snow, the wolves at his heels. He leapt. His hands closed around the lowest branch, and he swung his legs clear of the ground as the first wolf lunged in a flurry of snow. Painfully, Ivan hauled himself up into the ice-lacquered branches and sat gazing down. The wolves milled, snarling around the foot of the tree. Their slavering jaws were upturned, and their breath rose in plumes around him. Now and then a wolf would leap, its jaws snapping within inches of his feet. Soon Ivan began to feel cold. The wind whipped through the bare branches, and his dangling legs became numb. Soon he knew the frost would be in his fingers. It would spread through his hands until they could no longer grip, and he would fall into that whirling mass of fur and fangs. "Go away!" he cried. "Oh, go away and find something else to kill." But the wolves gazed at him with their cruel eyes, and their jaws seemed to grin. "They know," sobbed Ivan. "They know that I'm freezing. They're waiting for me to fall." He clung desperately to his perch. The cold began to seep through his hands. He cried softly, and his tears froze on his cheeks. "Farewell, little brother," he whispered. "I can never save you now." His eyes felt heavy, and his head sank slowly until his chin rested on his chest. He was going to sleep. The cold was going away. He smiled a little. He had only to let go now, and he could sleep and sleep until the end of the world. A startled yelp roused him. He shook his head and looked down. The wolves were scattering in all directions, and in their midst, rearing on its hind legs, was a huge bear. Its terrible claws hissed through the air, and the wolves fell back, snapping. The bear lunged at them, and they turned tail, slipping away between the frozen trees. Ivan cried out joyfully, then gaped with horror. Bears kill people, and bears can climb. He pulled up his feet, trying to move higher. The bear dropped onto all its 4 feet and stood a moment, snarling into the forest. Then, with only an upward glance at the boy, it loped off, melting soon among the shadows of the pines. Stiffly, Ivan climbed down. He peered fearfully all around, but the wolves were gone, and there was no sign of the bear. All that day, little Ivan walked on. Now and then he would break off a little of the bread in his pocket and chew it as he walked. And when it began to grow dark, he found another snowdrift and made a cave inside it. He ate more of the bread and snuggled down to sleep. At midnight he awoke, and it seemed to him that he had heard a voice. He listened. Outside, the wind was howling. After a moment, he closed his eyes again. "It must have been the wind," he said to himself. "Only the wind." But no sooner had he closed his eyes than he seemed to hear the voice again. He got up, knelt by the hole, and stuck his head out. The cold made him gasp. Ivan screwed up his eyes and peered into the darkness. There was nothing, only the tossing of the pines and clouds of wind-blown snow. Then, just as he was about to draw his head back inside, he thought he saw a movement under the trees, a small figure flitting across a paler patch between the shadows. Ivan cried out, clambering from the snowdrift. The figure, it seemed impossible, but from here it had looked like "Little brother," he cried. "Wait!" He was stumbling through deep snow. As he drew near, the small figure seemed to move back, so that he was always the same distance away from it. "Wait!" he cried again. "Oh, don't run away! It is Ivan, come to take you home!" But the figure was only a smudge now, a shadow in the shadows, and, as he watched it, faded and was gone. And he heard laughter in the wind and whirled around, but no one was there. The cold was like knives in his feet, and he looked down at himself through his tears. "My boots!" he gasped. "I left them in the snowdrift, and my mittens too." He turned. "I must go back at once, or I will die." He knew now that the figure in the trees had been Starek's cruel trick, and the laughter in the wind Starek's laughter. But when he looked around, he could not tell which way he had come. He ran first this way, then that, stumbling in the snow, but no way seemed to be the right way. The voice laughed more loudly in the wind. Ivan stopped. He was lost, and knew that very soon he would fall into a sleep from which he would never awaken. He closed his eyes and was about to sink down on the snow when he heard a shrill scream. He jerked his head round and saw a white shape that flew soundlessly between the trees. As he watched, it settled on a branch and stared at him with great yellow eyes. "Go away, Snowy Owl," he whispered. "Go away and find a mouse to eat. I am no use to you. I am no use to anyone." The owl leapt from its perch with a scream, circled his head on velvet wings, and made off through the forest. After a moment, it came back and flew round his head again. "Perhaps," thought Ivan, "it wants me to follow it." He was becoming very weary, but when the great white bird flew away again, he followed. In a few moments he saw the snowdrift in which he had made his shelter. He fell to his knees by the entrance and crawled inside with the last of his strength. The snowy owl circled the snowdrift once and was gone. When dawn came, Ivan wrapped himself up in his warm clothing and set out again. There was only a little bread left now in his pocket, and he knew he must save it, for he still had far to go. The wind was strong and the snow was deep, and Ivan went very slowly with his head down. All at once he felt the snow shift, and he cried out. Beneath his feet a great crack opened up, and lumps of snow as big as houses fell into it with a hissing roar. He flung himself forward, trying to reach the other side. His mittens grabbed at the lip of the crack, but it crumbled, and he was falling.